Welcome to Confronting the Line. This is our first show. My name is Mark Tafoya. I'm the producer, and I'm here with our wonderful host, Ann L. Peterson. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Mark. This is so exciting, so fun. Thank you so much for jumping in and playing with me.
Yeah, the podcast has that new podcast smell. Isn't that wonderful?
It does. It does. Although I have to say, I'm quite a podcast fanatic. I love them because I can be in the garden, I can be cooking, I can whatnot. Anyway, it's completely killed off my TV habit because now I listen to podcasts all the time.
Exactly. That's so great. And so we're here, and this show is really a great opportunity for us to have lots of conversations about all the stuff in our kind of modern world and how do we deal with things that confront us, things that
Yeah.
we're participating in, right? And so I'll just say the reason I'm here is because I was introduced to Anne through her book, and she published a book in March called Is This a Cult? And it's about confronting the line, isn't it? Isn't the book about
That's
confronting
exactly
the
it.
line?
I mean, that was, and all of that is very long thought out and deliberate. But the question, is this a cult? Was and in a way still is the question I was grappling with after learning a whole bunch of upsetting news. And but then it came to me, it was actually in a meditation. I was so excited when it came to me, like, no, I'm dealing with the line between exploitation and transformation. And even so much has happened since the book came out, not the least of which was meeting you. But the more that I've been engaged with this conversation, and I'm hearing from like tons of people, that line between what is transformative, which that was what we sold at Landmark, the company that I worked for in the world that I was in. But that the difference between transformation and exploitation is really fine. It's really quiet and it's sneaky. And I think that that's true in all kinds of setups in our world. I think that especially in the United States, where you can't even drive down the highway without being sold something, and without your consent per se. It's not like you said, oh, yay, like, every channel I turn into, every road I drive on, every, when I go to my mailbox, it falls out like somebody's trying to sell me something. Somebody's trying to get me to take action and move in some way. And that was the line that I wanted to confront. Like, wait, how did what felt like I was changing the world, transforming myself in the world, end up in me being really exploited for my labor, for my expertise, and giving away thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, wait, how'd that happen? How'd that happen? I don't feel bad about it. I don't have regrets. It's not like that at all. But I have a deep curiosity about how that happened to me and how it's happening to so many millions of us all around the world.
Yeah.
Every day.
And so we both participated in Landmark. Landmark Worldwide had previously been Landmark Education.
We'll just start where we started.
Associates, had previously been S, right? There were all these incarnations. But what I think is great about what we're up to is we're going to look at it through the frame of our participation in Landmark. But there are lots and lots of programs that are about, whether you call it self-help, transformation, there's a whole world of it. Right. And people are really eager for it, and they want it, and they want to help themselves. They want to deal with what it is to be a human in this world now, especially this modern world with kind of problems we have. But can they do it in a way that doesn't exploit them? And we'll hear and we'll tell stories about some of that exploitation and some stuff that might be really indeed culty, and other stuff that we say, well, we're not quite sure. Right. And we're not here to offer any answers. We're just here to open the questions and have conversations between ourselves and other people who are in this world.
Mark, I have a saying. It's actually a partner and we were trying to launch a summit a couple of years ago about collaboration, and we're going to come back to that. That's coming back. It's still a mad passion of mine. But when I was working with this partner and we were looking to create this whole summit related to collaboration, one of the things we got really clear about is that we don't need more answers, really. Like, there's answers to just about any problem. There's so much genius in the world. There's so much history with so many answers. But what we do need right now is we need new questions.
And there's all these gurus who are trying to sell you answers,
That's
There are
right.
gurus everywhere, right? So we're going to look at some of these gurus
We're
and
going to look
explore
at
why are we
all of it.
drawn? Why are we
Right.
drawn to these gurus? Why do we want the answers? And
Yeah.
why are we maybe afraid of just being in with the questions?
Exactly. And when we find an answer, do we ask the next question and then the next question and the next question? See, to me, that's where evolution is. That's where true growth is in the questions, in the act of questioning. And as I've discovered that what I was trained in via my participation in large group awareness trainings and personal development, mostly via Landmark, was what I thought was critical thinking, turns out wasn't really critical thinking. It was actually stopping critical thinking in certain ways, not entirely, but in a lot of ways. And so I'm really learning myself, like how to actually bring forth my critical thinking. I call myself a recovering codependent. So how to set boundaries, how to, honestly, my leaving Landmark has provided, in the 3 years that I've been leaving Landmark, I have engaged in more growth and development, I swear, than the 15 years prior, So
Yeah.
out of questioning and confronting the line between transformation and exploitation. And so I just really want to share that. I'm so grateful to you for saying yes to coming and playing with me on the show, because I wanted to do this. I'm doing lots of interviews with lots of really interesting people. I'm loving it. I'm meeting a lot of people. I love it. But there are things that I want to talk about that aren't necessarily going to get talked about in other people's shows and other people's places. So hence we
Yeah.
decided, let's start our own. And we'll be interviewing some of those people. They've agreed to come on already.
Yeah.
And there's an end that we're going to. For me, everything is in service of a safer, more ethical self-development and wellness space. I think it's the wild, wild west. I think a lot of people are getting a lot of value, and I think a lot of people are getting really hurt. And
Yeah.
that's what I've had to confront. And like really confront it and be willing to stand on that line and look in both directions and learn in both directions, learn from the value I've gotten and the value I've delivered as a facilitator, and learn from the dark side and the places where people have been hurt. And so I actually think that on the line is where we can see the most. But we got to be willing to stand there, and it's not comfortable and it's not easy, because you see a lot of things you don't want to see. You hear a lot of things you don't want to hear. It doesn't always feel good. There's a lot of self-reflection that's required. And so I'm just really, for me, this show is inviting people to come stand on the line and see what we
Yeah.
can see, and
Yeah.
see what questions we can ask in different ways and new ways, and see what we can see.
One of the things that I think is really cool is that a lot of the folks that are now speaking out, and there's been a critical mass that started to happen, right? There was
Yeah.
a catalyst, right? Your book was a catalyst for a lot of people, not only who participated in Landmark, but who participated in other pursuits, who are now looking and going, was my benefit, was my transformation, and all the wonderful things that I got in my life, was that worth the price that some other people have paid? Was that worth the exploitation? Was that worth the long hours, maybe the
Right.
harassment in some case? And in some cases, there was a real violation happening of people. Was that person's, the price that they paid, was my transformation worth that? And then many of us who were leaders looking at, did I unknowingly participate in the exploitation of people? And did
But I
I
think,
somehow damage someone along the
yeah,
way? Right. That's one of the things we're all
right.
looking at.
We're all looking at that, but I think so. Here in our first episode, I think we should go back to the beginning a little bit, because I
Yeah.
think, it's been that. So I published the book on March 7th. I wrote the book last Thanksgiving holiday. So whatever that is, November. And then I would say, living the book from 2020 on, well, really a lot longer than that, but what ends up in the book, the serious questioning. And here's what I think is important about that is it was what opened that closet door. So I opened a closet door, and I kind of knew I was doing that. And I kind of knew that there was some stuff. I was in the book itself. I reveal what I had found behind the closet door. What I didn't know, and would come to very quickly know over the 4 months, is that there was a lot more in that closet. And now I feel like I was a Narnia fan when I was a kid, right? I read the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and you know how you go into the back of the closet, and then there's another door, and then that goes to this whole land.
Yeah.
And I think for those of us that have been engaging in the questions that I raise in the book, which are very light, simple questions, but we've learned a lot in the 4 months. And that lot you just expressed what's there for a lot of the people who have read the book and who have been engaged in the questions I offer up in the book. So I think we should go back a little bit and just by way of introducing our show. And mostly I want to do this so we can talk about this part and then move on, because I kind of want to, you know what I mean? I'm excited to get to so many other things.
So about us, right? It's about others.
Well, and it's not all about Landmark, actually. I didn't really, Landmark and Werner and all that. And I have to talk about that because that's where my experience is. And both for legal reasons and for authenticity reasons, I to speak from my own experience. So in that sense, but I don't really want this to be a story about Landmark or a story about Werner or a story about that. I want this to be a story about confronting the line. And then what that makes available for us as human beings when we do that, where we're willing to take the risk to do that.
And of course, we make the disclaimer, like Ann just said, everything we're saying is our own experience. It's our own opinion. It's what we observe, right? We're not speaking on behalf of anyone. Nothing we're offering here is legal advice, medical advice, emotional, psychological advice, or counseling. This is people sharing what they've experienced in this world of personal development and self-help, and what people see, what we see, what they see for what's the future, and how can we practice both as a participant, as a practitioner, in a way that's safe and not threatening and not damaging to anyone.
Right. Exactly. Nice. So So anyway, so it's kind of fun. Because when we meet, we met because, well, tell me. So I wrote this as one little thing. So I'll say, I'm not going to tell the story of the book. Get the book if you want to know the story of the book. It's really good. It's a 3-hour read.
One night. Yeah. You can read it in one night very easily.
And Mark, let's not forget, one of the things we're going to do on this podcast, on this YouTube, is I am going to read the book. So we are going to have some episodes where I'm reading the book and you can be on live and you can be asking questions and like that. Yeah. So I'm not going to tell the story of the book here, but I will tell the story of publishing the book, because I think that is really, it was wild. So it was super, super scary, really scary. And it was scary for a lot of reasons. It was scary because Landmark is very litigious. It was scary because for 26 years, nearly my whole adult life, I have been a program leader. I have been, a program manager. I've been, I became Landmark. That was my identity. That's my whole social circle. My husband was the guy who led my first leadership program. Like our entire life was connected to a Landmark. So in a really, really big way, my reputation, I was about to completely alter my reputation. And I was proud of my reputation. I had a good reputation. I still have a good reputation, I believe, not with some people, but so it was really, really scary. And we had the whole, and I was really careful in how I wrote the book, and I had a fantastic publisher and a fantastic author coach. And that whole process was very cathartic. Really deep healing, and I highly recommend it. In fact, we're going to have our publisher on as a guest someday soon here. And but March 7th was the day we set to publish, and we set up to have a private. It was a Thursday, and we set up to have a private launch where it was by invitation only. And my partners over at Seek Safely, seeksafely.org, we'll have them in every show note because I'm passionate about what they're up to. And they put it out to their list. I put it to my list, but the whole idea was we couldn't really let the whole Landmark community know, because we wanted to get enough downloads and reads before they could get any kind of injunction and stop us. Because I was just so scared. I didn't know what they were going to do, because I was going to be saying truths that honestly, most of us sat around and talked about in quiet corners for years.
Yeah.
And I was asking the big C question. And when you read the book, you'll see why I was asking that question. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. But those were two really risky things. So March 7th, we have this launch. There's like 60 people on at Zoom. The book goes up, and we have it set to be a free download for 3 days. It's a Thursday night, Friday, I make my first social media post, and Friday at 4 p.m., I'm literally hitting enter and my fingers shaking because I know this is when the landmark, like all my friends, all my, community, all my reputation, like everything is going to change. I know that in that moment. And so I did it.
Oh, you're coming out of the closet,
I'm
right?
coming out and I'm breaking
come
up.
out.
I'm sort of announcing a divorce that I've been having in quiet. And I had been having it in quiet because I didn't fundamentally, my book deals with the wrestling between, wait, but I got all this value. I made a big difference, but there was all this bad stuff happening, and try to reconcile that. That's really what my book's about, is me confronting that question, confronting that line. How do I hold all that? And how did it happen? And all those kinds of things. And, it's all the things we have to confront when we start learning new information about something that is deeply embedded in us, and information we can't deny and we can't look away from. And it starts to change our view. And how do we deal with that? So
you hit return.
I hit return. I'm scared to death. I think, and what's funny is I participated in the Ridwan School, or Diamond Approach is this study path. It's a spiritual study path. I really love it. And I had a Diamond Approach weekend that weekend, which is all about living from your heart that weekend. So I was like, oh, that's so smart, because now I can hit enter and but I couldn't put the phone down. I couldn't do any, I was like obsessed. I was a crazy person. And, but so literally what starts happening is comments start coming in. And then every channel I have where somebody could reach me, places I didn't even know people could reach me through, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, my text for people who know, but it just starts lighting up. It doesn't light up with what I was I had prepared myself for, which was people to yell at me, people to say, how could you do this? You betrayed us.
How dare you? Yeah.
How dare you? Don't you know you're damaging the work, and you're going to make it so nobody does the forum, and people won't be being transformed anymore, and all this stuff. And that's what I think is going to happen. What happens instead is I start hearing from people that had drifted and disappeared years before, and I could kind of like never figure out why they didn't really respond to the different things that I had been creating and whatever. But I start hearing mostly from people saying, oh my God, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Same here. Can I tell you my story?
#me too.
#me too. Yeah. Or Dr. Glenn Doyle of Seek Safely. We were like, I said, I need a me too, but it's kind of a different me too. So he was the one who came up with same here, right?
Same here. Yeah.
So, and, by the end of the weekend, we have, or by the end of the next week, over 600 books have sold. There, people are reading it on Kindle. It's on Kindle Unlimited, so people could read it there but who's reading it is mostly people who have done Landmark and who have been hiding out. Yeah. So for me, it was all these people I'm hearing from, and all this same here and all this stuff. And it was overwhelming, and and gratifying in one way, because I, like them, suddenly knew I wasn't alone. I wasn't alone in the questions. I wasn't alone in the heartbreak. I wasn't alone. And that's kind of what I said is like those disaster movies, when the disaster's over, and then all of a sudden people start climbing out from their little hidey holes. And they start going, and turns out in some hidey holes, people were holed up together. Like I heard from a whole group of ex-center managers that have been talking just to each other on calls weekly, trying to sort through what happened and why things were going the way they were going in their lives out of Landmark, which is very different than how you are told it's going to go. And, but it's like, we're coming out, and we knew I didn't die. I'm not alone. But then we're left with a lot of questions. What happened?
Yeah.
What
and
happened?
What now?
And what now? Right. And so I would say that's kind of where, as a community, as it were, we're still in that. And it's healthy. That's a really, really healthy place. And
frankly, that's where I came in. So about a week after you published, I think it was probably like March 14th or something, I get a text from a friend of mine who is one of those people one of the few people that I had also led programs with at Landmark that I was still in communication with, because we had both left. She had
Yeah.
been a seminar leader. I had been a seminar leader, but where we were connected was we were both classroom leaders for the team management and leadership program at Landmark. And we became close friends. And so we had known, like, she knew my story, I knew her story. We'd both been out for several years. And literally, I get a text from her and she says, "Have you read the book?" in all caps. And I'm like, "The book? What
I love
book?"
that
And
it's
she
called
sends
that.
me the link. Yeah, she sends me the link. Is this a cult? And L. Peterson. And I'm like, finally, someone is speaking out. And listen, I got to tell you, the day between I ordered it on Amazon, I got it the next day, they're quick. I was like, I couldn't wait. And I was looking at your Facebook profile and all the comments. And I'm thinking, this is juicy. I can't wait to read the book. But I already knew what the book was going to say. I knew because I lived that.
You
I
lived
experienced
it.
that. I'm like,
Yeah.
it was something along the lines of, we're out to affect the world and create a world that works for everyone. But somewhere along the line, you realize you're a salesperson, and you may actually be participating in something that is harming people because you know it harms you, right? And so for many of us who were out for a long time, all we were like, I just don't want to harm the participants. I don't want them to see how the sausage was made, right? I don't want them exposed and tainted by the experience that I had that was negative, and many other people who participated at a higher level. And I think that's one of the reasons why we siloed ourselves. We did it to ourselves. A lot of us just kept quiet. We're like, I'm not going to talk about this. It's embarrassing. I don't want to feel like I was duped, whatever reason. But the book was that moment. It was a catalyst. I devoured it in 3 hours. Literally 3 hours. I read the whole book cover to cover, and I got every second of it. I wasn't like I was rushing through. I got and it's easy to read. It's told in a very wonderful,
memoir. It's my story.
It's nearly chronological, but it just makes sense. It shows your journey through as a young person, as how you got started, how you got into Landmark as a participant, and then how you really grew as a person, and then again this dark side that you discovered and then had to deal with. So, and it tracks, right? Anyone who's participated at any higher level, whether they were on staff or a program leader, you were just nodding your head, going, "Yep, yep."
Yeah.
That too. Yep. Definitely. That tracks. You were just like, it was the whole time. You were like, yes, in that way where you see something, you're like, finally, someone sees me.
Yeah. Which, funny enough, when you do the forum, that's kind of the experience, like, oh my God, I'm seen. So that's part of what hooks you. Right. And, which is great. That's all fine. But, I knew that if I wrote the book there's a lot of reasons, and it's interesting because the reasons have kind of evolved as things have happened. But back then, if I put myself back then, I was like, first of all, I knew the stories about Werner being abusive. One they were already out in the world, and they were going to be coming out again. And that was going to create an existential crisis for the graduates of Landmark's programs, because it's confusing. Werner had been erased, but then he was being brought back, and it was all like very confusing. And because I had worked directly with Werner for the most recent part, the last part of my history, I kind of knew all of how that happened. So,
can we just for 1 second, can we just do a super quick, just say who this is? So this is Werner Erhard, who is the person who created EST. So in the 70s, there was this great awakening of, the beginning of this self-help movement, the personal potential growth, all of those words. And he was like the king of that. He created this thing called EST in the 70s, and it kind of took over the
Robbins
world.
Way before there was a Tony Robbins. Like, I always tell people, depending on your age, he's either the father or grandfather of transformation and human potential. Like, he was there. There's more, that he wasn't the only one that decided that movement by any stretch, but he was the one who made it popular in the secular world.
And he grabbed the headlines out there. He was really big all over people. And in the 70s, it's the me generation, that decade of where people were wanting to self-actualize, they ate it up. And he was this big, and it exploded. So there was this thing called EST. And then he created Werner Erhard and Associates. And then there were a couple other iterations along the way. And then in 1991, they created Landmark Education. And that's the point at which, because there had been many controversies, there had been accusations, there had been exposés, and they said, okay, well, he's going to sell the company to the employees,
Yep.
Employees will now continue the work, and he
Don't
would
tell too
step
much, because
back.
we have guests coming up in very soon episodes that will that were there. So one of the things, guys, subscribe, because one of the things that we're going to do in the coming months is we are going to tell these stories, and we're going to tell these stories with people who were there, who were a part of it. And, you know, because that tracks back to part of why I wanted to write the book was I wanted the whole story. I was looking for the whole story of what I had really been involved in, what was really going on. And then the more I've gone down that rabbit hole, I still want to know more. I'm learning every day, every week. As I'm getting calls now, I'm, you know, hearing from people who were literally there in the room when EST was created, when the forum was created, like all this stuff. And they're going to come and talk to us. And we're going to get it in depth. I just
wanted to give the little kind of super short synopsis, right?
Exactly.
So then you have this thing called landmark education, and now Werner's not a part of that.
No.
Or so we think.
Other than in the corporate Q&A to explain how he's not a part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then that company that was called Landmark Education then became Landmark Worldwide, and that's the name that it has today. So that's what we're talking about. So when she references Werner and this work, it could mean EST, it could mean the forum, it could mean the Landmark Forum, it could have to do with Werner, or it could have to do with people who are not Werner. So that's kind of the world of Landmark and the forum that we're talking about.
I call it the WWW. The wacky world of Werner, which includes all these other entities, right? It includes the Landmark and the forum and Technica, all this stuff. But so just back to this part, I wrote the book in part because I wanted to begin I want the truth out there. I want the truth, because without the truth, there's no informed consent. People are participating in something they don't understand and they don't know. And honestly, Mark, Landmark leaders are leading work that they don't understand, and they're leading it in ways that are harmful, and they don't even know they're doing it. So I love those people. I know they probably don't think that right now, but I really do. And I really, really, really wanted to send out, I always say my book is an amuse-bouche. You know, we're going to use this podcast, this show, to start to give the whole meal. It's perfect. You're a chef. We'll use lots of those now.
We'll do the main course.
But I also knew that I had credibility. Yeah. I knew that people could hear me, partially because I'm not going to make it wrong. Well, every once in a while I get angry, which is different than making it wrong, by the way. We'll probably do a whole episode about that. But, you know,
and how could you help but not get angry when you hear some of the stories of, you know, that people have to share their real experiences?
Yeah, no, like I said, the book for me, I reveal a little bit, and I talk about, I would say, the fairly benign and common experiences that people who were working on the inside, once you get into an accountability in that organization, which claims to have 3.5 million people have done their programs, and had up to 44 offices worldwide at one point, it's a shareholder owned, kind of, sort of, 600 people, employee owned. So it's a pretty sizable organization. And in the world of personal development and self-help, that space, they're one of the big kids. And I even end my book with actually a challenge for them to join the Seek Safely movement and to join the conversation. I'm now, with what I've learned since the book came out, I always will have a tiny hope in my heart, because it's just who I am. I do kind of believe in rainbows and unicorns a lot, even though I've had my heart broken a lot. But I do still kind of hope maybe someday. It's not looking good, but that I knew that somebody who spent 26 years working in that organization, which is so integral and such an important part of the whole human potential self-help movement. And I got to the levels I did where I was working with the source, which is what they call Werner, and that I could be heard. And I committed to being somebody who told the truth, the good and the bad. So helping people, like I was dealing with myself, sort the baby out from the bathwater. How do we do that? And like that. So to me, also, that's a big part of what our show will be about, is helping continue to sort that out, because it's big, and it's not confined just to Landmark. You know, they claim so much spun out of EST, honestly, and some of the stuff we've seen, like Keith Raniere of Nexium. I've become friends with Sarah Edmondson and Nippy, who, huge shout out. They've been an enormous, them and their team and A Little Bit Culty have just been an amazing support for me. But
and folks should know that so if you see The Vow on HBO or HBO Max, that's the story of like these folks who realized, oh my gosh, we're in a cult. What do we do? And getting out of that cult and kind of, having accountability for the horrible things that happen there. That's what that whole story. So The Vow, and then they have a podcast called A Little Bit Culty, which is a fun amazing podcast.
Yeah, everybody should follow it. It's great, fantastic. So, in fact, they interviewed me before the interviews that you see with me on A Little Bit Culty were actually done before the book release. So I kind of have multiple lives. I have like before I stopped hosting for Werner and being a Landmark, acolyte person, which was around 2020. There's that, and then there is, and there's a whole story behind that. We won't tell it here, but because LEC 2020 was when I started, and 2020 is when I ended. So there's a big 2020 has a lot of deep meaning for me.
Me too. What's the year I left?
Yeah, but then it's also then there's like before the book and since the book. So I think that's a good place to pause that part of the story there. But so then the book goes out, it's going out. There's my Facebook is lit up. There's 600, 800 comments. People are talking. I'm hearing from people. There's a little bit of pushback. I can count on one hand how many people have actually said kind of nasty things to me directly.
You're just angry. You're on it. You're bitter. Blah,
I'm
blah,
a
blah, all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
I've heard that Harry Rosenberg, the CEO of Landmark, is in some of the announcements to staff bodies and stuff, is just lamenting about how he wishes I had come to him and and like he doesn't know the last communication from his office to me was a legal threat. So why would I go to him? And so all that's crazy. But I want to get to the part where you come in because it was really cool for me because you're one of because I opened myself up. I wanted to be available. And so now I'm here. I'm starting to hear all these stories. And what I reveal in the book is about this abusive environment around the source, Werner Erhard. So that's what I know about. Yeah. And of course, in my time as a wisdom course leader and a Landmark leader, I had people come to me from time to time with stories about stupid doings of various center managers and things. And I would help get them clear and cleaned up and then put them back in play, and I just always thought of those stories as kind of one-offs, or somebody sort of doing something stupid. But
it's a person being out of integrity, not an organization or a system that's set up in a particular
that is out of integrity, right?
Yeah. You relate to as, oh, that guy was a jerk. That person was out of integrity and needed to clear, or complete that. But no, you're hearing all these stories. Yeah. And so I read the book and I contacted you and I said, you ready? You want to hear a crazy story, right? I was a person who had participated for many years as a customer, and I was a person who assisted. I did the team management leadership program, which is one of their big flagship programs for building teams and teamwork in any situation. I was an introduction leader. I led classrooms for the team management leadership program, and I led seminars for Landmark.
And for our listeners that are not familiar, that all of that was volunteer up until September 30th of 2022, which we'll do an episode into. I found out yesterday. We're just going to drop tons of teasers. So definitely folks subscribe because you're going to want to hear this stuff. But I actually found out what was the impetus to finally closing down the assisting, which is Landmark for volunteer. So the volunteer program. But so all that you're doing, so you're leading these leadership development, the entry leadership development programs for the communication curriculum, and then ultimately for the main, what's called the curriculum for living, or was then. I don't know if they're doing that now. Yeah. So you're leading all that. So you're doing all that and you're a volunteer. And doing
complete
all that.
volunteer, so doing it out of what I got for it personally, and the love of making a difference for other people, contributing communication to the planet, supporting people in healing themselves in their lives, and believe me, I did all that. Like that, like the contributions that Anne made, the contributions that I made were real contributions, and we, if people hear anything in what we're talking, what made all of this so difficult was that we were really making a real difference, and our heart was really in it. We were all in.
We'll have to have Chris Shelton on to talk about weaponizing empaths, because he's got a really great conversation. So I've since kind of learned how organizations will use our desire to do good in order to gain free labor, in this case, in order to gain registration, to
exploit
gain sales,
people, reputation, all of that stuff. Yeah. So for me, I left in 2020 because there was an incident where basically my personal life was invaded by Landmark, right? My personal sexual romantic life was scrutinized and judged, and they were telling me that it was out of integrity and I shouldn't be doing that. Literally telling me the way I led my sexual life was bad and wrong, and I shouldn't be doing that, and it's going to bring ill repute upon the organization. And so for me, that was that moment of just, whoa, am I participating in something that's trying to control me? And it doesn't work, because I'm not out of integrity. I'm completely in integrity in all the agreements I've made, and in the agreement I have with my husband, and the agreements I have with the people that I interact with on a romantic level. Like, it's all good. It's all copacetic. All cool.
They have this thing about the cosmic joke, which I've never quite exactly understood. But the cosmic joke, as I see it, is in all this time. What was it? 7 years that you were participating prior to that?
It was about 18 years total. No, well, it was 2003 until 2020, whatever that math is,
17
right?
years.
17 years.
So 17 years.
I was a program leader from 2012 on. So 8 years. I was one of the people, leading the organization as a volunteer, not as a staff member.
So one of the things I want people to hear, and some of who's listening to this, watching this, many of them, probably most of them at this point, will have, because they're tuning in because they know us, because there's some kind of Landmark connection. So they've got some kind of thing. But look, as you're participating in the programs, as you're participating in even volunteering at those early levels, that's a kind of grooming, right? You're being groomed, you're being indoctrinated into kind of a way of thinking. It's not all bad. Anything we participate in is indoctrinating us to a certain degree. So I'm not even saying it's good or bad, but it is a kind of grooming. But then when you get to where you got, which is you go into the seminar leader program, which I've since learned, I didn't do the seminar leader program. Some instinct in me always knew that that was not a good place to go. It wasn't a fit. The more I've heard about it, the more I am so grateful. But that really is the beginning of what I would now call the Werner training.
Yeah.
So now they're going to start to break down your identity to rebuild your identity in the image of the source. Why? Because if we have that was the 1970s view of scalability. Go create a whole bunch of Werners, and then you'll replicate Werner's success. There are still people that believe in that trajectory as a way to create success. Success, not sex, success. So
that could be a way.
Maybe, who knows? But that is one of the pieces of misinformation, right? Is that to have Mark's success, I need to become the being Mark. That is misinformation. That is wrong.
Yeah.
And, but a lot of people have been kind of indoctrinated into that idea that if I adopt certain ways of beings, then I'm going to become certain things. And if I become those things, then I'm going to take those actions, then I'm going to have those results.
Yeah.
So what I can say, 20
people in this kind of forceful, strong, very male way, then I'm going to be just like him. And it doesn't work that way.
That's right. And plus now Landmark, Werner Erhard and Associates Landmark, the whole lineage has been sued so many times that they've got all of these rules too for kind of keeping everything on the straight and narrow. They really, what's different about Landmark than Scientology, which tons of Landmark work is based in Scientology. I'm so sorry to say that. It was very upsetting for me to learn that, but I've since learned it's very true.
On some level, we kind of knew that. We intuited that, right? On some level.
I lived in denial because I was always so proud that I never became a Scientologist. So I would have fought to the death. I literally just watched, Mark, last weekend. I finally just watched Going Clear all the way through. I could sit and watch it. And mostly because I've met Chris Shelton, who's absolutely fabulous. Another amazing show people should watch. So, but
it's the same experience of nodding your head along and going, yes, exactly that. Like I described while reading your book, like, yes, that.
Well, and I did while watching The Vow. I'm like, wait, that's really familiar.
Similar tactics,
Wait,
similar experiences.
exactly. So that's all that happened. So when you call, you know, when I called you and said, okay, what happened? What happened to you? And
Yeah.
when you really described being in the seminar leader program and being told that you needed to change who you were in the name of self-expression, in the
Yeah.
name of
Yeah.
integrity, like that, and kudos on you that you didn't do that. You heard that that was wrong, something was off in that, and you walked away. And
I
for
just
folks
walked
who want
away. Yeah.
yeah, if you want to hear the whole story, you can, well, let's tag it in our show notes on this, where
We
you
will.
tell the
Yeah.
long version of the story on Brian and Eric's podcast, How Did I Get Here?
Yeah.
But I just was so impressed with you at that moment, because honestly, you did what I didn't do. And which is when I saw things that were kind of like, that's not right. I rationalized them away. Like, I walked by a lot of red flags over the
Yeah.
years, and I wouldn't know that till much later, because I didn't know what red flags looked like. But when your reputation, 18 years, your friends, your family, you've defended this
Yeah.
organization,
I've registered hundreds of people into this work.
yeah, exactly. So and you've lived a narrative that this organization is the source of everything good that's happened in your life for 18 years.
Yeah.
So that's confusing too, because wait, if they're not the source, what is the source? That's a very confusing thing. We'll talk more about that again in future episodes.
Yeah.
But that kind of the strength of character that it takes in that moment, because that was the moment I would say you were on the line.
Yeah.
You were on the line. And
I
you
had to
knew
confront the line between, am I gonna continue on this path and this great work that I think I'm doing, or am I gonna continue to be myself? Am I gonna give myself away and say, oh, now I'm gonna end this thing I'm doing must be bad, so I'm gonna kind of toe the line? And it was just crystal clear for me. Hell no.
Yeah.
Hell no. I'm not going to give up myself, right? As a queer person who had to come out and like build my life and have it look, and literally what they say is, anything you want for yourself in your life, you can create, as long as you invent a possibility and you enroll others in that possibility.
And you're having
gotten. And yeah, like I got that, and I created that. I created a life with a wonderful man, and I have this open queer lifestyle that really speaks to me, that is my self-expression. And you're telling me people might not get that, and they're gonna think it's scandalous or strange or weird, and as a representative of this company you can't do that. And I said, well, great, then I'm not a representative of this company then. No problem. I have to be myself.
Mark, that is such the rare, in the literally hundreds of stories I've heard, that is the rare story. Most people leave Landmark because they get sick. So a lot of, particularly staff whose lives are really wrapped up in it, they get very, very sick.
Autoimmune disorders.
I have an autoimmune disorder, right? So but that's not why I left. Although I was very sick when I left being a staff member in 2012, but it took me a few years to kind of sort that out. And I knew I was burned out and I was tired. I didn't know how sick I really was. It would take a bit to figure that out, but they're sick. Or ultimately for me, I wouldn't say I left until they kicked me out when they threatened legal action against me. Yeah. So when they threatened legal action against me, and it wasn't even the fear of the legal action, because I knew it was kind of crazy. I knew they wouldn't win the legal action.
It was oh my God, it was like the heartbreak of that, wasn't it?
It was
wasn't there just a total heartbreak when that happened?
That was a betrayal. The heartbreak happened for me, like the heartbreak happened when, so we'll tell a little bit of the juicy part of the book. But just a tiny bit, right? So I had a number, not one, not two, a number of people, staff that worked directly around Werner. And I had been hosting Werner since 2012 and a kind of a little bit of a resurgence tour. And so I worked closely with his staff during that time for a significant part of the year. And I had a number of them come to me with questions about things that were happening in their work environment that were abusive. And they wanted to know, was it normal for these things to happen, so on. So anyways, they come to me and I was quite shocked. I was shocked, but I wasn't surprised because it made a lot of things that I had seen, abusive, verbal abuse and so on, bruises. It made some things kind of like make sense. There was nothing about what they were saying to me that was hard to believe at all. And this is before I start doing research. And then I find out that all these same allegations and accusations had been levied against Werner many times before, many times in the past. I didn't know that yet because I hadn't really done that research yet. So they start coming to me. Okay, that's shocking. That's upsetting. And I'm, they're asking me for advice. I'm giving them the best advice I can give. And at that moment, and I'm kind of grappling with like, wait a minute, how is the architect of integrity, as I was teaching it and understood it, operating so out of integrity? Well, okay, I can get it. I got it. I can hold that. What really broke my heart was at one point they had gone to Harry Rosenberg of Landmark, who happens to be Werner's brother. And they went to him in part because Landmark is how most people get on staff with Werner. They come through Landmark, right?
So they're not affiliated officially, right? And on the surface of it, there's no affiliation, right?
Surface would be a very good,
Well, yeah,
but
exactly.
underneath,
So then it's like
totally
they're feeding this one through this one, essentially.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And kind of hiding it a lot. And I sort of knew that because I had gotten calls from forum leaders asking me for recommendations for who they could recommend to be on Werner staff. And which I remember this one, I told this guy, I said, I would never recommend anybody to be on Werner staff. And he was really shocked. And this is before I knew about the physical abuse. This is, before people were telling me about alleged physical abuse. I was like, this was just out of what I was experiencing hosting him and working in the inner sanctum for a while. And so, and that person was super shocked. They're like, why would you say that? I said, just trust me. I said, the work environment.
Wouldn't recommend it. Yeah.
And I wouldn't recommend it.
You'll be surprised to hear that I was one of those people that got recommended to do this. And it was brought to me as like, hey, it's a real super secret thing. You can't tell anyone, but we have an opportunity that you could work with this particular person. And I was like, oh, if it's the person that I think then no, thank you. I don't even want to have the conversation.
I'll pass. Yeah. It's smart.
But something in me just knew. I was like, I don't want anything to do with that guy. Because my whole participation at Landmark was supposedly during the era where this guy had nothing to do with it.
He didn't have anything,
we came to find out later, well, he did,
Yeah. But so bottom line is, at one point, it's like, well, look, you got it. We're trained. Go to somebody who can do something about it. So they try to go to Harry to inform them that people are being abused so that he can know that, so he knows what he's sending people into. We I've since found out through outrageous betrayal that Harry was a part of that in the way back when. So he knows, but we didn't know that then. It's like, oh, maybe one, he needs to know so that he doesn't send people anymore. And two, he is his brother, so maybe he can help make it stop. And they had very explicit, like they just wanted to make it stop. They wanted to make the abuse stop. And he had this other process of doing what's called pay refunds, where when he got mad, they're contractors, so he would demand a pay refund, and they would have to forfeit a part of their pay, a practice I would come later to learn also was practiced in Landmark. So my heartbreak was really when Harry didn't respond with what to me would have been just basic human decency. Oh my God, thank you for telling me. We will look into it. I appreciate your letting me know. And kind of end of it. I mean, I know legal things. They got to be careful. They can't, they don't want to put Werner at legal risk. They don't want it, whatever. But he didn't do that. Instead, he's like, no, you guys are just bad employees. You're trying to get all the kind of victim blaming and shaming that we've come to see all too much. But what was heartbreaking for me is that was happening from the organization that I had represented and taught something that was so different than that. And I was just, that broke my heart. I cried and cried. I mean, when, this group of folks that were just trying to make abuse stop, were just trying to recover pay that had been stolen from them. and they just wanted to clean it up, and they wanted to keep it all in the family, and they wanted to keep it quiet, and they didn't want to, rock the boat, and they didn't want to risk transformation, blah, 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 blah. And that Harry was like on board.
Yeah.
That was when the glasses came off for me. Like it
Yeah.
really, really, and I say it in the book, but that was my heartbreak. And then they threatened me legally.
I
So
mean, it's funny. I'm kind of thinking of that scene in Casablanca, right, where the police inspector comes in and he says, "Gambling here? I am shocked." And it's like,
just
come on.
right,
We're
right.
kidding, buddy.
Yeah. Well, that's when we really learned that, the true meaning of racket, right? So there's a distinction in the forum racket, and that means something very different. But a true racket is, the candy store out front, the meth lab in the back.
Yeah.
And
A criminal
so
enterprise that you're covering up by, oh, look, we're just doing this very
yeah.
innocent thing over here, but you're money laundering or you're doing some kind of criminal activity.
Right.
Yeah.
So I literally spend 6.5 months crying, pretty much. Walking,
Yeah.
that's how my, my book opens telling that, but I'm like walking the neighborhood, I'm crying. I'm trying to somehow reconcile what I thought I was a part of with what I'm learning I was a part of. And then I start getting calls from some reporters who are kind of getting wind of this story, because it's a number of people that are talking about this. And as we know, the whole like cult exposure, blah, 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 it's a whole genre now. So people have been asking the question about Landmark for years and years and years and years and years. Is it a cult?
Yeah.
So, and because
and
I
we
had
were trained as
publicly,
program leaders to actually answer questions about how it's not a cult. Like they gave us a whole script, which now you're like, oh God, why would you, if it's really not a cult, why would you need to give us a script to follow the company line to explain why it's not a cult? Right. But
exactly. And it was, so it just started me on this whole journey of learning. But as I heard from different reporters asking me different questions, which I mostly didn't answer because I had been trained, like talking to reporters was the worst sacrilege thing you could do. I eventually get up the courage to call Rick Allen Ross, one of the leading cult experts, who we had been told was like the devil, and just asking some questions. One of the reporters introduced me to the book Outrageous Betrayal, and now I am off to the races. I am down the rabbit hole, really trying to learn, wait, what was I really a part of? How did it all really work? And I would say by the time I published the book, I knew about 30% of the story. Now I probably know about 70% of the story, and it doesn't get better, folks. It gets worse.
Yeah.
And so I'm working my way through that. But
you talked about the book being this amuse-bouche, only to really discover, well, there's about 17 courses to come, really. If we're going to really tell the stories of all the people who experienced some kind of thing that was in opposition to what it was presented as, right?
Correct.
Then, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of stories. It's not an isolated thing. So you start to go, is it systemic? Is it part of the design of the thing rather than an outlier?
Is it part of the design? I've now, for myself, I've answered the question. It is systemic, in the staff level for sure. That what is systemic abuse? So verbal, emotional, and even physical abuse are systemic. It's happening in the Landmark centers and offices on a regular, not by everybody everywhere for sure. There are lots of really great center managers that don't do that. But what happens, that I've talked to a number of those center managers take the abuse so as to protect the graduates, to protect the staff. So you kind of have two kinds. You have the kind that assimilate and then carry forward the behaviors. And then you have the other kind that take the behaviors in themselves until they get very sick, typically, is what happened.
And where have we seen that model before? Where have we seen that? We see that in women who shield their children from the abuse coming from, an abusive husband, right?
Yeah.
Or, as you say, you see that in families where cycles of abuse get perpetuated, where people replicate that abuse and hand it down. It's like the guy gets yelled at by his boss. He comes home, beats the wife hits the kid kicks the dog, and there you go, right?
Exactly. And it doesn't, it doesn't abuse people, don't always abuse people. That's a misnomer that we should bury in the ground. That's not, most people who experience abuse do not pass on abuse. I learned that from Dr. Glenn Doyle. Shout out. Thank you, Dr. Glenn. So that but that's what's happening to me, right? I'm talking to all these people that are outside the landmark bubble. And then I'm looking at the landmark Werner bubble from outside and seeing all this stuff. But one of the reasons why I wrote the book, that a lot of people won't understand unless I say it, which is why I wanted to start our own channel so we could really tell people can hear straight from me, was I wanted them, all this stuff's coming out. Most of it's already out there. There's already, it's been published. Outrageous Betrayal was published in 1993, I think. And WikiLeaks has the 60 Minutes video on it. You can see this stuff. And in the age of the internet, and given I was getting calls from reporters, I know the stories are coming out. And I actually was waiting, 2022, 2023, and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And, and in the meantime, I'm learning and I'm deconstructing and all this stuff. But I wanted to be one of the first people talking because I wanted to be who people would ask, because I knew I would tell the truth. I would tell the truth about the value people get as well. That I would, and because I had worked at so many different levels in the organization, all the way up to working with Werner, that I would, I just would tell the truth. And I wanted the hundreds of thousands, millions they claim of graduates to know the value they got was real. They were just misdirected on the source. The source of the value was not the program, was not the work, was not the forum leader, was not that. The source of the value was you. You got some great tools and you built great stuff with it. And don't let any of all this news you're going to hear in the coming years, the Netflix specials that'll get made and whatever else happens, don't ever let any of that take away the value you got. And I wanted to speak because I wanted to be able to say that.
Yeah. And Dorothy, you had the power all along. You just had to click your heels 3 times and say, there's no place like home.
There's no place. So funny, Mark. I just read for book club. For my neighborhood book club, I just read, it's written by, I just left my, the true story of Dorothy. No. I've seen Wicked. Wicked is amazing, but this is an even better book. It's now going to drive me obsessively crazy. I can't think of it. We'll wrap up with this note because it's one of the most amazing books that tells the backstory of Dorothy. I'm going to Finding Dorothy by Elizabeth Letts.
Okay, I haven't heard of this.
You should read it. It's so good. It's the best book I've read in a long time. Okay. But it tells the story
as a friend
of the
of Dorothy, I'll have to read this book.
You will. It's so good because that story in its time was life-changing. I mean, it was the Harry Potter, right? So it was what Harry Potter was to my daughter's generation then. So,
but isn't
it's fun you bring up that reference.
Yeah, it's that thought that you really are the one who has the power. You just have to learn it, right? That's the journey. That's right. It's actually part of the hero's journey, right? If you want to talk about, that kind of trajectory, but so that's the cool thing, right? So it's people are now in communication. They're talking to each other. They're sharing their stories.
Right.
They're finding out, I wasn't the only one. Right. And it's and then now what? Now some people want to continue to participate in these kinds of programs, but they want to do it in a way that's safe for everyone. And some people are, had all of this time leading programs, and it's I have all this knowledge and I have all this experience and expertise to give, but I want to do it in a way that works, that has integrity,
that's safe. But to understand, we just launched the Safe Practitioner Workshop, which I'm super excited about. We just did the 4th session of it, and we'll be doing that and continuing that. We'll make that available in every way we can find, and the we is myself and the Seek Safely organization. But because what I also have come to see as what I would say practitioner, as a facilitator, if I don't stop and confront the line myself, I am going to unwittingly fall into the same traps that we have seen. I've now worked with several guru-y kind of people, some of them great. I mean, they're all great in one form or another. Even Werner is great. And Werner has an illness, and his illness, that's how I frame it for myself. So I can, reconcile it and live with it. But it's easy if you get a little influence, you get a little fame, your work takes off a little bit. There isn't anybody who couldn't become a cult leader and become a destructive cult leader before they knew it. So or in a lesser sense, carry forward practices in personal development, in self-development, in coaching that are harmful, that are exploitive, that hurt people. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. I really invite everybody to have grace for yourself wherever you are in this journey, wherever you are in this exploration. And it's not about who you were before you knew. It's, it's about who you are after you know.
Yeah.
And and to me, like, that's, now that a lot of people are coming forward and they're talking and they're sharing their stories, and we're having these conversations about, well, did I consent? What is consent? What is agreement? What is love bombing? Did that happen
Yeah.
to me? Like, hey, let's have the conversation so you can choose for yourself.
Yeah. And that's what the line is. It's like, you look at that
Mhm.
and like any moment you see, wow, there's something that I have in this moment. I'm going to either go this way or that way. Like, which way
Yeah.
is the right way? That is the way that speaks to my soul and who I am.
And my values. We're going to
Yeah.
launch a consumer program pretty soon. That is the point of it. It's just a simple little, like, 1-day thing that you can do, or you can do it online, whatever. Really, really simple. It was actually created by the folks at Seek Safely. And but the point of it is to really get grounded in yourself, so that when you're looking at personal development, when you're looking at wellness, I'm bringing wellness into this as well. There's so much crazy stuff happening in the wellness, whether it's psychological, spiritual, emotional wellness, or physical wellness. There's so much rampant, like, craziness. How do I know? How do I know which one of those 90 Facebook ads I see a day, or those 500 emails that come to me that are going to teach me how to fill my funnel, in my coaching business, who are going to How do I know what's real? How do I know what's not real? Exploitation is when people are taking your money or your time, the resource that you are, and not delivering on the promise of that time and of that money.
Yeah.
And
Wonderful.
they're using that. So we'll explore it all.
So there's the sampler. There's the kind of the quick download, a little bit about me, a little bit about Anne, a little bit about kind of why are we here and what are we confronting here? And we're going to have the opportunity as we go along to have a lot of people to share their stories, to talk about their point of view, where they're coming from, and we're going to confront that line each and every time.
That's right. That's right.
All
Thanks,
right.
Mark.
Thank you, Anne.